Check mic. Mic check.
Test one. It worked.
Welcome to the Dire Wolf Show, where we believe that America is exceptional and that our constitutional rights should never be infringed. I am Dire Wolf. On our show, we bring you the truth and debunk fake news. If you love laughing at the insanity of the regressive left, sit back and relax. Boy, do I have a show for you.
Welcome back, Wolfpack. Dire Wolf here, maybe, for our weekly news recap from Behind Enemy Lines on YouTube, where speech is not free and the truth is demonetized.
It's not only us being late, but also my inability to activate your mic. That is just absolutely disqualifying for Ron DeSantis as a potential presidential candidate.
Yeah, he wouldn't let this kind of thing happen. He should have.
No, he would. That's why it's disqualifying. It's his fault.
Yes, right, correct. Yes. So this is definitely disqualifying for Ron DeSantis. Also alongside me is my co-host, Fox Travis. How you doing?
That is a lie. That is a lie.
I messed up your name.
There's a liar. Dyer the liar. How have we not figured that one out? 5 years and haven't figured that one out yet.
Yeah, none of our critics have thrown that at me yet. Yeah. So we got a shorter show for you because, well.
Let's not count our chickens before they hatch here, Dyer. we have a shorter script.
Not shorter than the time that our show is supposed to take, which by the way is still 2 hours.
Yes. We have a shorter script today, but I don't know that we have a shorter show.
You know what you're thinking?
We'll find out.
Show, it's usually 3 hours plus. You're right. We're really bad at doing the 2-hour thing, but we try. Not very hard, actually. Hey, thank you for everyone who makes the show possible by liking, sharing, subscribing. Thank you very much for those who donate to us financially. We appreciate that. But please share our content. You can all help us out, whether or not you're doing money monetarily or not. We appreciate the likes and the shares. Please also follow us on Rumble because our time here on YouTube is probably not long. We've had our streaming removed a couple times because of strikes. We still have an active strike on the account, and we're not going to stop telling the truth, even if that YouTube doesn't realize it's the truth yet. They're still going to be giving us strikes for it, and we're not going to stop saying the truth. So I'm not sure how long we'll still have an account here. So while we do, I recommend you follow that link in the description to follow us on Rumble.
Yeah, because we're bad boys. Sounds like Crowder is now back. Did you hear that? Crowder's back in action.
Yeah.
He's on Rumble, and I believe he has successfully tipped the scales where he had more active viewers on Rumble than he did on YouTube. And that's not because he had overall less active viewers. He still was pulling like 200,000 to 300,000 live, and more than half of them were on Rumble, which also crashed all of Rumble this week, which was fun. But Crowder is now partnered with Rumble, and because of that, Rumble has been encouraged to do better with their infrastructure, and it sounds like they are making every effort to do that. And Crowder being over there full time certainly will bring people over there, and for the first time in ever, it seems like there now may be a viable alternative to YouTube, which is a good thing. That is a good thing. This is Crowder leading by example, not leading by yelling at people about stupid stuff.
Yeah, I think we should stay on YouTube as long as that we haven't been kicked off, so we can keep trying to pull people away from YouTube and to Rumble. That is my goal with why we're still broadcasting there. Man, I couldn't find the clip, but I found this on the topic of opening funding comments. I found this really funny clip of Kamala doing one of her standard speeches where she was talking about the future. I believe it was I forget where she was at, but she just kept repeating this like same 4 words in a different format, and still had the tone as if she was talking to 5-year-olds. And like, at this point, is it her speechwriter who just doesn't give her anything to say?
No, we've heard a lot that her speechwriters get mad at her because she goes off topic as well. And then she will often yell at the speechwriters because she doesn't like what the speechwriters have written for her. And I believe that the kind of palace intrigue is that she's gone through, I think, 2 to 4 speechwriters since they took office. And so what I believe that we're seeing now is quite possibly genuine Kamala. I think that this is her in the void of speechwriters because she has chased them all off.
It's almost like an AI but actually dumber. Sorry, I want to insult AIs. This is artificial, not intelligent. She is given a phrase and then cannot add anything to it, just continues repeating that phrase in different ways. There's no thought about it, no analysis of it or any information added. She doesn't give any additional information. She just repeats it over and over again.
Yeah, she's just a regular off-the-shelf, text predictor, not any kind of AI. Certainly not. It'd be scary if she was, because she'd actually know how to do stuff. All right, well, great opening, funny comment, Dyer. We'll do better next week.
All right.
Something that's also hilarious is the state of our military.
Is it?
Yes, it's super funny. Because if it's not funny, it's really scary. It's one or the other.
I would say it's pretty scary.
I choose to laugh.
So
also, this AI generated image of Congress is also kind of terrifying.
All the faces are screwed up.
Yeah. Well, are they screwed up?
I think it's just simply showing the darkness inside their souls.
I believe that the one up in the top left there, he is possibly the Rake. I think this is how Congress I think this is what they look like under their skin suits. So probably pretty accurate.
I thought they were lizard people.
They are lizard people.
All right,
I didn't say that they were lizard people under the skin suit. I said, I'm implying that they maybe have another skin suit.
There's been a lot of hearings, in the House last month, I guess, right? Last month or so.
Yeah, and what are they hearing about?
So one of the hearings is about the military and diversity and inclusion, and what those policies have had, what effects they're having on the military. And I
assume that by in that context, assume you mean diversity of tactics and inclusion of all kinds of weapons.
No, actually, they're talking about trying to teach people about critical race theory and gender theory. And remember when Milley said he wanted to know about white rage?
That sounds like a really good sustainable idea. Is teach you guys how to kill and then also teach you how to be racist. That's not gonna end poorly.
So we had the diversity stand down that was ordered by Secretary Austin, where a lot of man hours are put into small group sessions talking about racism and white supremacy, and
not because we have unprecedented lack of military readiness across the board, not because we keep smashing Navy ships together, not because we have just complete inability to fly the F-35 on any kind of real mission, not because the Army has completely missed its recruiting targets, not because the Special Forces have also completely missed their recruiting targets and are almost completely empty now. That's not the reason why we're standing down. We're standing down because of what?
So they're standing down because they believe that there's the military has a white supremacy problem, which was something that Austin also said, and also Milley said that there's a white supremacy problem in the military, and they were going to try to combat that by doing these small group sessions. You also left off that the Navy failed to meet its officer quota, and that there was a report that came out that the naval officers, the vast majority of them, are not combat capable.
They're not even putting out a fire capable, apparently.
They are not competent to command a ship in combat operations. That the vast majority of naval officers were unable to do that, and also that there was, like you said, there was an incident where a ship burned down in complete loss due to a fire that could have been put out. It's because the entire bridge crew did not know where the fire suppression system was. As an example, it was determined the reason why that was because there was not enough training for the officers on how to command a ship and its functions. So there is real world effects of us not spending time on actually training people to be lethal and effective warriors.
So we're already experiencing tangible skill gaps because we've spent so much time during the regular training sessions focusing on diversity, inclusion, and equity. And because we are already doing that, we are now going to completely pause their regular jobs and then spend even more time on diversity, inclusion, and equity training.
Something that also isn't highlighted is that there's a lot of people getting out in the last few years. So one reason why they need to have such high recruitment is because they have a lot of people getting out, and it's causing a brain drain of the military. The experienced guys who've worked long careers building up all that institutional knowledge, they're leaving, and we're filling up the ranks with the newer people who were entering the military during the time where they are seeing those advertisements for "I'm fighting for my two moms" ads were out, and those are the type of people that we're filling the ranks with. When this diversity and inclusion, this diversity stand down happened, there are some places like where I was in leadership, and I talked about how racism is not allowed from any group, and I gave examples from that were level-headed. So like BLM and anti-white racism is just as wrong as anti-black racism, and that we all wear green, we're all the same, we're not going to be treated differently. I gave those kinds of messages, right? I threw away the guidance they gave me and gave my own briefing for that stand down, right? Now, but other people who have heard Milley and heard Austin and heard the Biden administration and their opinions on it, they would take that opportunity to give very anti-white racist briefings. And I think that they knew that was going to happen, right? There's been a slew of complaints sent to Congress. That's one reason why these hearings are happening, is that predicting these hearings, a bunch of people have been complaining since Biden got in office that they were subjected to a diversity briefing that was blatantly anti-white, or their leadership did something that was blatantly anti-white, and they're seeing there's a problem with this anti-white racism being pitched as diversity and inclusion, and that's in the military, and that's one reason why they have these hearings. Now, they may not expressly say, white people are racist, but it sounds like their statements of Milley and Austin are giving cover to the actual racist that they've hired.
They're pushing the bar. The attempt is to push the Overton window, and that's slid pretty far over the last 5 years, and well, I don't know that we can take another 5 years of it sliding.
Yeah. So one of the people brought in before the hearings was Gil Cisneros.
Cisneros.
Yeah. So he's the undersecretary of the Department of Defense. Secretary of Defense, and he's Undersecretary of Personnel and Readiness. And he was confronted over some racist tweets that were sent out by one of the DEI, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion directors in DODEA. So I just want you guys to know what DODEA is before you hear the briefing. He is the Secretary of Defense Undersecretary. And under the Secretary of Defense is the military, and also one of the activities that they're responsible for is the DoD educational activity, which is the system, the organization that runs all the schools on military bases for military personnel's families' kids to go to. So they are not military. They are civilians that are government employees, GS positions, paid basically equivalent to a military salary to work on military bases with military personnel, having to deal with military life.
Kind of like a parallel Department of Education shoved into the Pentagon to make sure that your kids get taught while you're abroad.
Right. So my kids have a English-speaking American-style school on my base in the country I'm at, and not that's not the local schools that my kids be going to. Right. So that's who this person, Miss Wing, is. That's where she works for. Now he is responsible for the readiness and personnel of everyone within the DoD and DoDEA. So that's just for some clarification before you hear it. Now let's watch the video clip to see what happened during the hearing.
You yield 5 minutes to Representative Waltz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just want to start out and make something very clear to all of our witnesses, everybody watching, to my colleagues. We would not be having these conversations if we did not consistently, certainly, well, I'll say from my perspective, if I did not consistently have soldiers, cadets, family members, and their extended networks incredibly upset, disturbed, offended, and bringing us things like how to understand your whiteness and white rage, a lecture taught at West Point, taught by a woman who said the Republican Party today, not years ago, not in history as part of a history class, today is a party of white supremacy, that white people are outraged by the advancement of black people. A lecturer at the United States Military Academy. And I can go on, and Mr. Chairman, I'll enter all of these into the record. Orientation training at the U.S. Air Force Academy. Don't say, recommending to brand new impressionable cadets, don't say mom and dad, say parent, don't say boyfriend, girlfriend, say partner, don't say colorblind. You know, I mean, we can go down the list. So I guess my point is, and to my colleagues as well, this isn't coming from us. I think deep down a lot of people think that Republican lawmakers are making this stuff up just to score political points. I would have no idea about any of it unless I had whole binders full that cadets and soldiers were bringing to us. So what you need to ask yourselves, and I said the same thing to your enlisted leaders across the services, why aren't they coming to your chain of command? I said this to the Air Force Academy superintendent. Why didn't they feel comfortable coming to him or his chain of command? Why did we have a conservative Muslim cadet who was disturbed and offended, didn't feel comfortable, or a Caucasian cadet who thought they would be canceled? You need to ask yourselves this as we deal with this recruiting crisis, and I ask you to pull those filters back and maybe look at kind of the other side of this equation. So we had the first African-American Secretary of Defense order a service-wide, entire department, 2.5 million members, stand down over extremism in the ranks. Yet, and we had a hearing in this committee on the same topic, yet a year later, the Pentagon's own study shows 100 service members out of 2.5 million. In case everybody wants to do the math, that's 0.0004% engaged in any form of extremism. And we hear a lot about, well, we need a military that reflects society. In fact, the military is overrepresented compared to society, with by 2020 figures, 20% African American compared to 13%, 18% Hispanic compared to 18%. So I'm trying to figure out what is the crisis that you're trying to address, Mr. Cisneros. We have less than 0.001% engaging in extremism. We have a representation, a strong representation, a proud representation of minorities within our ranks. Why this focus on DEI?
I don't think there's a crisis that we're trying to address, but we want to ensure that all individuals...
We had a training stand down from the Secretary of Defense as the first order.
Well,
Not on accidents, not on planes.
Yeah, it's not a big deal that, it's not a big deal. It's a big deal that you noticed. It's a big deal that you noticed. Stand downs are a pretty big fucking deal, are they not, Dyer? Oh, we have lost.
Sorry. Repeat yourself.
Stand downs are a pretty big deal, right?
Yeah, that means that we stopped doing our daily operations. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, why would you? I mean, it's actually a pretty big admission if he's saying, well, it's not really a crisis. Well, why did you stand down then? I mean, there's one of two options here. Either it is a crisis, or he does think it's a crisis, but can't justify why it's a crisis, or he doesn't think it's a crisis, and it was frivolously done to stand down the military at the cost of millions and millions, hundreds of millions of dollars and readiness. That's a pretty big either or. I think that he should probably choose his next words carefully here.
Crashing, not on ships crashing, although those things are happening. We didn't have service-wide stand-downs then. We had one on extremism in the ranks, though the own study showed no extremism.
well,
And we have an overrepresentation. We do have a military that reflects society.
There are
despite
there
what
are
my
cases,
colleagues would assert.
You just said yourself, sir, that there are cases of extremism. Now, you may say it's like not that many, but I think 100.
We lose more people in accidents.
100 cases of extremism.
Out of 2.5 million?
is 100 too many. I mean, we had an individual just this month who got sentenced for there was a neo-Nazi who
And
was
that's
trying to turn his
horrific.
platoon
I want to
over.
be clear and on the record. That
Yeah.
should always be prosecuted.
And fuck off with the neo-Nazi stuff. We just sent a couple billion dollars to the Nazis in Ukraine.
You're funding the Nazis right
Yeah,
now.
I mean, it sounds like that guy was just he just was.
They're
just
not
on
the
wrong,
right Nazis.
Yeah, well, he was just on the wrong deployment. If he had been deployed to Ukraine, it would have been fine. But he was, probably deployed to Westchester, and that became an issue.
Prosecuted. We should never stand for it any more than we should stand for those tweets. But I want to so the goal is the elimination then of any type of racism in the military, because racism will always exist. So we have to look at priorities with limited dollars.
Well, I think we are looking at priorities, and Secretary Austin's priorities are defend the nation.
Can
take
I
care
just
of our
ask you
people,
very
and succeed
quickly,
through
what's the
teamwork.
difference in equality and equity?
Equal-
Equity is equal outcomes. How do you get equal outcomes in the United States military?
How do we get equal outcomes is by ensuring that everybody is treated equally. Ensuring that there is
that would be equal opportunity,
Well,
my friend. Equal outcomes is communism.
well, we want
Gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Can you also cue up the next picture, the next video? So that was there's another part I wanted to talk about. I put them in the wrong order, sorry. But he's talking about a lot of the stuff we were already mentioning about how the military seems to have its priorities wrong. And that's him talking about all the many complaints they're getting from the military. A lot of people are choosing to get out because they don't want to continue to be lectured about how evil they are. When they joined up to serve, they didn't expect to be told that they are evil white supremacists. So this is the from Matt Gaetz questioning Gil Cisneros, that same guy you just saw.
I would like to go back to the tweets of the racist person that works for you. What does caudacity mean?
I have no idea, Congressman.
You took 6 months to investigate one tweet. You didn't even figure out what the words meant?
I didn't investigate the thing. She's a DOD.
Well, you
she's
said in the Fox
she's
News
a-
article that you were going to take 30 days and investigate it, and it took you 6 months. In a 6-month investigation, you guys didn't learn what caudacity meant? I think you know. I think every person that's going to watch this exchange knows you know. She's trying to lash audaciousness with someone being Caucasian, isn't she?
I have no idea, Congressman.
Wow, what an investigation. When she
Well,
says PD
I did
sessions,
not.
when
I
she
will
says-
say I did not do the investigation. She is a GS employee that's employed by DODEA.
Well-
DODEA conducted the investigation.
Gosh, the Pentagon told Fox News Digital that Gil Cisneros would provide a final decision in 30 days. So someone at the Pentagon is throwing your name out there as being responsible for this, and now it looks foolish that you're suggesting you don't know what that means.
Well, I would say that
hold on,
that
PD
quote did
sessions.
not come from
let's
me,
go
and I
to
don't
let's
know
go to
who
this,
that
Mr.
came from.
Cisneros. What's a PD session?
Dyer, what's a from your perspective in the military? What's a PD session?
So PD is a daily use, extremely common term referring to professional development, something that is supposed to be an ongoing process that everyone is constantly going through. And so it's understood that PD means professional development.
You said it's an everyday occurrence kind of a thing. Like everybody would know that. It's not like a random maybe once every 4 years kind of a thing. Something that only comes up when you're re-enlisting. It's a term that has a everyday kind of context.
Everyday context, yes.
Okay.
My guess would be personal development.
Personal development. You don't think it's professional development? Another open matter for the investigation that it didn't resolve. So you don't know what caudacity means. She's obviously talking about professional development there. And when she says, I had to stop, or let's go to the next claim. The caudacity to say that black people can be racist too. Mr. Cisneros, can black people be racist too?
I've already stated, Congressman, that I didn't agree with her statements.
But I'm asking about that provision. Can black
agree with
people
the
be
statement.
racist?
This question is about me or my personal beliefs, but again,
You're
I
the
don't,
leading official over DEI.
I don't
A
agree.
racist person who works for you puts out these tweets, and you won't say whether you agree or disagree.
I
with
told
the
you I
statement.
Mr. Chairman, I
I
just want
don't
to
agree
remind
with their
members to
tweets.
observe standards of decorum.
This
You're
is
okay?
decorum. It's my time. Can black people be racist?
I do not agree with that tweet.
Do you agree with that statement? I'm asking you a statement. Can black people be racist?
I'm not going to answer that, Congressman,
Why not?
because you're asking me a personal opinion, and that's not what this
Well,
is about.
actually, I'm asking you in your capacity as a senior DOD official in the Biden administration, where we see recruiting falling off the table, whether or not the embrace of racist tweets, whether shuffling these people around rather than firing them, and whether this little exchange here is helping or hurting recruiting. Let's go ahead and put up the recruiting.
I will tell you, we do not support racist tweets. We do not support racism.
Well,
in
did
the
you
military.
fire this lady?
Again,
You hired her.
As I stated, I did not hire her. As she was,
DOD hired her.
as it was stated earlier, she's a DODEA employee. She's a GS employee. The inquiry that was done said these tweets were done on a personal matter.
Oh, a
and
personal matter.
it
How do you know it's
it
a
was done
personal
at a
matter if you don't
personal,
know that the PD
and
could
it
stand
was
for
within-
professional development?
and it
Mr.
was
Cisneros, this is a professional development session where she attacked white colleagues and took the position that black people can't be racist. Now, you can't answer basic questions about it, and here's what I would propose to you. This is what we're looking at in recruiting right now. It's fallen off the table. And when you have employees that you don't fire who do racist things and say racist things, then you really hurt the ability to recruit people who want to be part of an inclusive and diverse force.
I would say the data that we have is not, the recruiting is not falling off because of that. But again, the Department of Defense, DODEA, does not agree with the tweets that she made.
It was
She
at
is a
3 o'clock
GS.
during the workday. You didn't fire her. If someone puts out racist things, do you fire them or do you just move them around?
That was not an official, that's her own personal
See,
Twitter account.
here's the problem with the double standard, Mr. Cisneros. When Caucasian members of the military post about the Second Amendment or supporting building the wall, you all seem to be on a white supremacy snipe hunt. You seem to take people's personal views and weaponize them against them. And I've had people in my district who serve that wonder whether or not some joke that they forwarded or meme that they liked is going to result in the ruining of their careers. But you have no such interest when it's a person like this. You delayed the investigation. Your own name was what DOD put out as conducted the investigation. You delayed it. This lady makes like $160,000 a year. Do you really think today the taxpayer should be paying this lady that amount of money?
The investigation was not conducted by me. That was never.
Well, why did the Pentagon say it was you?
I don't know who the Pentagon in that said that, but I will tell you it was a misstatement.
But
and it was
Mr.
not true.
Chairman, I seek
the
to enter-
investigation was
Well, I'll tell
conducted
you what,
by
I'll tell you
DODEA.
what.
Don't you love that, Dyer? Whoever at the Pentagon said that I was responsible for the people I'm in charge of, that was a misstatement.
I'm wondering what general or the Secretary of Defense possibly had determined that he's now calling them a liar.
Yeah, it's like, the Pentagon. If the Pentagon said that I was a responsible leader, they were mistaken. That is a misstatement. And
So the irony is, it's actually his job description. So he, as the Undersecretary for the Secretary of Defense for personnel and readiness, means that he is responsible for advising and creating the policies and procedures and standards for recruitment, the assignment of positions, promotion, within the ranks and retention of personnel, both military and civilian within the DoD. So he put out the recruitment requirements for this lady, Kalisa Wing. He put out the standards for which she needs to behave while on duty and off duty. And he is the one who is responsible for ensuring what are the requirements for her being fired from her job.
And she is, if I understand correctly, so she's in charge of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Initiative within the schools that your kids go to.
Exactly. So I believe she probably worked at the headquarters, because there's 4 different regions for Dodia's leadership, and I believe she was like the head at the headquarters of those 4.
How does that make you feel? I mean, this is something that like kind of directly affects you. You have multiple kids in that school system, more on the way going into that school system. I mean, how do you? First off, that there's even a position within that system that is educating your kids, that there's even a position for diversity, equity, and inclusion, but also that position is staffed by a person who, says that, I mean, that's something that you've said, that is that black, because it's just an obvious thing. It's something I've said too, that black people can be racist, but she would say that you have the caudacity to say that. I mean, how does that make you feel, that is somebody who's in charge of?
It makes me very angry is the short answer, but that's why I sit in on classes. I meet with the teachers. I put out my expectations of those teachers. I feel them out, ask them about their opinions about.
You crush doorknobs with your bare hands in front of them so they know that you mean business.
Any teacher, for every year for my kids, they know exactly that I am not going to tolerate, and I will be a problem for their career if they teach any critical race theory, any gender theory, if there's any sexual education for my kids, if there's anything down a long list of things, I give them, that I will be a problem for them, and that they're not to teach my kids those things. And I will follow through on that because I know what is, they're allowed to teach. This person, I mean, they're not allowed to say it's okay to teach that black people can't be racist, but they do intend people to teach that. But the leadership of the organization won't take credit for it, as Gil Cisneros is not taking credit for it. He just set the standards that would encourage people like Kalisa Wing to say those things. So he said he's not responsible. He heads this office for personnel and readiness for DoD, Department of Defense, as if Department of that position isn't over the DoDIA, which it is. So he is responsible. He didn't directly hire her. He's intentionally misunderstanding it. No, you set out the standards for which she would be hired and retained. See, the reason why she wasn't fired was because you didn't make it a standard that if you are racist off duty, then you will be fired in that position. However, I want to point out that I have worked with someone who was white, who on Facebook said something to the kin of black people should go back to Africa, and she lost her job. She was kicked out of the military for that. So this isn't a two-way street. You are allowed to be racist towards white people, but if you do say something similar about black people, you will be removed. If you say something off duty, not to your colleagues, that's part of it. Is in the DoD, including civilians, you can't just say stupid shit like this and have it not affect your career. But that's not what happened here. She was talking about how she was giving a professional development course, and that then she was telling someone that they were wrong for saying that black people could be racist. And they said it was after hours, outside of work hours, as if that means it wasn't in her capacity of in her job. Like the military and DoDIA, it is expected for, if you want to be successful in your job, you have to do extracurricular activities outside of work hours. You have to do things for work outside of work hours to benefit the organization, to show your dedication to the organization and to support it. I do volunteer stuff all the time.
I'll also say too is that as the resident civilian of our duo, we civilians don't tend to speak in acronyms at all. You military types tend to exclusively speak in acronyms. Then when asked to define that acronym, you then give us another soup of acronyms as if that is some sort of explanation. So I have every now and then begun to use acronyms with you when I'm talking to you about something that we've talked about in the past and I've talked about multiple times, and you've used the acronym, and then, oh, okay, well, now I know what that means, and you know what that means, so I feel comfortable using that acronym. Civilians will, in the context of working with or around military people, they're only going to be using acronyms that have rubbed off on them. So, as you just said, Dyer, the acronym of PD, meaning personal development, that's not what that means. It's not a thing that exists in the military. And civilians don't usually talk in acronyms on their own. So where did she, what could she possibly have been using that word for? She only could have gotten it from the military environment that she's working in, which means professional development. And she would only use it from that. She wouldn't have come up with it from herself or gotten it from somewhere else. That notion's ridiculous. So I think that the idea that, again, I don't think it takes a lot of investigation. Also, how much money did we spend on this investigation? 6 months.
Oh,
6
so
months,
no.
and we couldn't even determine the broad strokes of what that tweet even meant.
So here's what happened. There was initial outcry from people who saw the tweet. A bunch of people reported it to Congress. Congress demanded answers from the Pentagon. Pentagon said, "Oh, don't worry, we'll have our undersecretary investigate it." And then they did nothing. They were hoping that it was going to just the outrage would go away and that they could just leave her in her extremely lucrative position where her entire job is just to tell people that they're racist. By the way,
do you have the ability to request a copy of that investigation, or to maybe question it, or
I don't think there was an investigation. So here's what happened. So that's what I was trying to explain to you, is that there wasn't really an investigation. Or if there was one, it happened right at the very before this hearing. So it was also mentioned that he only gave a response right before showing up to the hearing. He had 6 months, and he only said the conclusion to his investigation right before showing up.
Well, because what was 6 months ago? 6 months ago, the Democrats were very confident that there was not going to be a red wave, and because they're always confident there won't be a red wave, even if there is going to be one, because they have means of making sure that it doesn't happen. And while there was a lackluster red trickle, we still got enough to take over Congress, and they didn't think that was going to happen. And so 6 months ago, oh, it's so easy to say, oh, yeah, we'll investigate it, and then just tuck it away forever. You never got to talk about it again because no one's ever going to look into this. And then, lo and behold, elections have consequences, and now it comes back up.
Yep, and
Matt Gaetz in particular being part of the group that held McCarthy's feet to the fire and demanded these kinds of hearings. A lot of the hearings that have been happening over the last couple of weeks, I don't know about this one in particular, but a lot of the hearings would not have happened but for holding McCarthy's feet to the fire and not just giving him a rubber stamp of becoming speaker, but demanding real actionable things before he's allowed to get elected.
Yep. So she was only recently moved. Only, as far as I understand it, she was only recently moved and not fired. And it was because they had to do something last minute because he was going to get called before Congress and asked about, what has he done.
But isn't that strange too? What did she get moved for? There was apparently no results to the investigation. I mean, if there's no results to the investigation, then under what premise did they move her?
Well, his letter said that she was found not guilty because she had said those things in her private capacity and not to her colleagues, and no DODIA personnel heard her say those things, which no one believes.
So if you're a racist in a forest and there's no trees around to hear you, you're not a racist.
It doesn't matter because her off-duty conduct directly impacts her ability to do what her primary duty, which is to be an advocate for diversity and inclusion. She can't do that when everyone knows she hates white people.
It'd be interesting to know if she did that from. It sounds like, I mean, 3 o'clock doesn't really sound like off-duty time, but it'd be interesting to know if she did that from a.
That's when the letter was sent.
It'd be interesting to know if she did that from a phone that was paid for by the DoD.
3 o'clock, I believe, was when the letter was sent before his showing up to the hearing.
No. I think Gates was saying that the tweet was sent at 3 o'clock because the guy was saying.
Oh, sorry, you're right.
Yeah, the guy was saying, "Oh, well, she tweeted that during off hours." And Gates is like, at 3 o'clock.
No.
Most people are not off at 3 o'clock. I sometimes am.
The professional development was supposed to be, according to his letter, was off duty. The tweet might have been, which, by the way, then he's tweeting about this stuff at work. But anyways, so
Dyer and I have never tweeted or have
not all the lot, never.
Nope.
But anyways, her job, her primary duty is to be encouraging diversity, acceptance, and inclusion, right?
Yeah, in theory, let's go, let's give her the best benefit of the doubt. In theory, her job is to make sure.
How can she do that if everyone knows she hates white people and thinks black people can't be racist?
Yes.
That's impossible. So they removed her from a position, put her into a position that they're not telling us what it is, but she's still probably getting paid just about the same amount of money, just moved to a different office. Might even be in the same organization for all we know. But she's been removed of the title, and then she was found not guilty. So I guess that her words, according to them, are okay. I would find it interesting if someone who was white were to say the exact same thing, but with the roles reversed, and see how long it takes for them to get fired.
I think we have some examples of that. Yeah, I mean, there was a pretty big purge during COVID. They even had the FBI investigating you guys, finding who they could get rid of, which was, I guess an interesting use of FBI time. Where are we on the notes here? Because the notes, I think we've gone through about 3 words of the notes so far. So where are we
actually, I have been reading them.
You have been? Okay.
Yeah. I just been paraphrasing them because I wrote them, so I didn't really need to go word for word.
All right.
So this is just one example of many. The previous guy, he listed off a few of them, and you've already listed off several of these as well. But we had the Army Officers College at West Point teaching a class about understanding whiteness and white rage. And we had the troops being forced to watch videos that declare that their systemic racism and white privilege throughout the military. Military guys sending letters saying, hey, I don't feel comfortable with what they're briefing us, what they're telling us, what they're accusing us of being, and it's causing people to leave. And then people are seeing the advertisements and the current status of the military, and people are refusing to join. So the Army fell below their goal for recruiting by 25%. The Air Force was below its recruiting by 10%, and the Navy was down over 10% in its officer corps recruiting. It's a big problem because we have a lot of people leaving and not enough people joining. We also had military leaders telling their troops to consider the color of an individual for setting up award packages. So that these are not things. Diversity and inclusion. First off, their DEI policy is not actually including people. It's excluding people. It is dividing people. So it's not what it's supposed to be doing is doing the opposite. And it comes at a huge cost of people leaving, cost of brain drain, and cost of not spending time on training people, giving them the knowledge they need to do their job, the training they do their job. And we're not also equipping these people with the right knowledge or equipment they need to do the job well. But you know what? We are training and equipping someone pretty well. Do you know who that is?
Is it insurgents in Africa?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely. We are not training or equipping our own guys. We definitely are training and equipping terrorists in Africa, apparently.
Well, I mean, I think that the strategy that we employed in the Middle East over the last 20 years of equipping random farm groups to overthrow their governments that we didn't like. I think that was a really successful strategy over the last 20 years. So I don't see why it wouldn't work well in Africa as well. Do they have a hover tank on the right there?
I know, isn't that fucking awesome? That was AI generated hover tank.
That's awesome. I love it. Alrighty. So we have. Do I need to play this video? I do need to play this video. Alrighty.
General Langley, I have constituents that have been scattered across Africa on train and equip missions. So just ballpark, in the last decade, how many Africans has the United States military trained and equipped?
Congressman, I don't have that figure. I can get that figure for you.
Ballpark, just, how many?
Congressman, it would be a wild guess right now.
Seems like something we should know, right?
Over the years, we have trained a substantial number, especially in the Gulf of Guinea states, including
Like more than 10,000?
It is more than 10,000.
More than 50,000?
I'd say we're reaching around 50,000
Okay.
at least.
And what percentage of the people we've trained end up participating in insurrections or coups against their own government?
Very small number, Congressman. Very small number.
So what percentage?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's not a lot, there's not a lot of countries. I mean, I think there's about 200 plus or minus, 20 given on what day it is.
As a percentage of countries, it's pretty low.
Yeah, and so there's not a ton of countries. The number of countries in Africa is a much smaller subset of that. And apparently we're dropping that number by accident. And so I mean, it doesn't take when you say, well, there's 10,000 and only a small percentage of them overthrow governments. Well, it doesn't take a large percentage of them to overthrow a lot of governments. Okay, let's roll us back a little bit here.
And what percentage of the people we've trained end up participating in insurrections or coups against their own government?
Very small number, Congressman. Very small number.
So what?
Dyer, you've trained people, right?
Yes.
What percentage of the people that you've trained have gone on to attack an American state?
Not a single one, actually.
Oh, really? Not just a very small percentage?
Yeah, I can confidently say not a single one.
Okay, so none of them have gone on to overthrow a government of any kind. Not even like a city government.
I mean, I don't want to jinx it,
Very, very small percentage of people that I've trained have overthrown governments. It's not a lot. Less than 10,000.
Very small number, Congressman. Very small number.
So what percentage do you think?
I'd say probably less than 1%.
But it does happen. Right?
The IMET program is
What is 1% of 10,000? About 100. Yeah, 100. So I mean, how many countries are there? It doesn't take a lot. Also, and it's 1% of about 50,000, right? So we're really looking at 500 people. Is that a small number? I mean, I guess it depends what you're comparing it to, but when you're comparing that to the number of countries in the world, it's I don't think 500 is a very small number compared to the 200 countries in the world, and then maybe like 50 to 70 countries in Africa. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think that's a big number or a small number? Maybe a medium well number.
I'd like it to be 0, honestly.
Yeah, we had a complete stand down because there's actually less racists. There's less racists because they said there was 200 incidents out of 3 million military members. There was 200 incidents at 3 million military members of racism, and we did a total stand down of the military of all branches for that. Yet we have about the same number of insurgents from a much smaller pool of 50,000, and that's just business as normal. It's a very small number, very small, very small.
Yeah. Nothing to be concerned about.
probably less than 1%.
But it does happen. Right?
The IMET program is
It's
in
only
force,
probably
and
not even a
and we've
guarantee
pushed
less
a
than
number,
1%.
a significant number through our schools across the.
Yeah, and what
military
data
infrastructure.
sets do you track to arrive at the conclusion that less than 1% of the roughly 50,000 that we've trained have participated in coups? Because it'd be like about 500, about 1% of 50,000.
Congressman, you may have that information. I don't at this time, but I know.
Well, I know there are some, right? Like go ahead and throw up that image. This is Colonel Mamade Doumbouya, and this is a photo of him. Did we train and equip him? In Guinea?
By name, I cannot identify that.
Well, that guy in the middle with the big red hat, Colonel Mamade Doumbouya, that's him with a bunch of U.S. service members outside of our embassy. And just months after this photo was taken in 2021, he led a coup in Guinea and threw out the leader. Does that concern you?
Congressman, core values is what we start off with in IMA programs.
Do we share
stick to
core
that.
values with Colonel Doumbouya?
Core values. I will repeat that. Core values.
I know.
Respect for humanity.
Do we share those values with Colonel Doumbouya?
Absolutely. In our
do?
curriculum.
He led a coup.
We do.
Okay, well, that's a very telling answer. In Burkina Faso.
That's. Man, I wanted to play. I wanted to stop it, but I also wanted to let it play through. But wow, that's pretty embarrassing, right? That you got the picture with your class and your teachers outside the embassy, and you sent it to mom. You put it on Facebook. Apparently, you can see the watermark there. Obviously, somebody is very proud of that picture. And then 6 months later, he overthrows New Guinea. Like, wow, that's pretty embarrassing, right?
It's pretty embarrassing. Yeah.
Pretty embarrassing. It's only funny because it's so terrifying and sad and disappointing. That's the only reason why it's funny. That's pretty wild. And then okay, so the question that he was asked is let's roll this back because we wanted to focus in on General Langley here having an NPC breakdown during this questioning. Let's roll back to hear what the question was that Gates asked, and let's listen to the response that Langley gave.
Core values is what we start off with in IMA program.
In 2021, he led a coup in Guinea and threw out the leader. Does that concern you?
Congressman, core values is.
So Dyer, we had a guy that we trained, right? Following me?
Yes.
All right, so it's a guy that we trained, and then he led an insurgency against a country that we're not at war of. Does that concern you?
Yes, it does.
Oh, not core values?
I'm more concerned about the fact that we were training and equipping people and sending them off to overthrow governments.
Yes, but have you considered core values?
But that wasn't brought up. It seems like a different topic. And what he did here was he tried to do a really clumsy, like really dumb transition from the talking about the training and equipping mission, which is happening in Africa, to the innocent circumstance of that we have a training program that claims to just be teaching core values of a democratic civilian-led military system, which is a course they apparently provide to military leaders from many different African nations as kind of an ally building initiative. And he's trying
and you and I have some ideas as to what this might really be, but we'll save those for after the video's done, right?
Right. So if you believe that they're bringing people to a U.S. base from military personnel from a bunch of different countries just to talk to them about the structure of our military and how our democracy works, and that's it, and that those people would volunteer to come travel to our base just for that slideshow briefing, I have I think I have some ice I could sell to you, to an Eskimo, if you were an Eskimo. But I think it's hard to believe, but I'm not going to speculate. What I do know is he already admitted that there is a training and equipping mission. Then he tried to move away from that. So he just admitted it. I have to claim it. there are apparently people writing to Congress saying, hey, we're currently training and equipping militaries in Africa, and then they're going and committing coups. So that's why he's asking this question. And he's trying to change the topic to this other course that is about democracy and about core values of democracy. And that's what he's trying to say. But he's not even giving his cover story correctly. It's not a convincing or coherent cover story. Let's continue.
Congressman, core values is what we start off with in IMA programs.
Do we share
stick to
core
that.
values with Colonel Doumbouya?
Core values. I will repeat that. Core values.
I know-
Respect
I know.
for humanity.
Do we share those values with Colonel Doumbouya?
Absolutely. In our
do?
curriculum.
He led a coup.
We do.
Okay, well, that's a very telling answer. In Burkina Faso, did we share core values with the leader that we trained there who led a coup?
It's in our curriculum. We
Leading
stress
coups
core
are in our
values.
curriculum?
We request civilian-led governance.
Wait, hold on. Is leading coups in our curriculum?
Absolutely not.
So-
Civilian-led,
My
civilian-led.
question is, do we share core values with the coup leader in Burkina Faso who we trained?
Holistically, we teach core values with a respect for civilian governance, apolitical, and that's what sticks across very high percentage in the 90 over
But not
99
everybody, right?
percentile.
But not everybody. And I wonder how many people it takes to plan a coup. I mean, initially you didn't know how many we trained and equipped. Then you said it was 1%. You had no basis for that 1% number because there's no data set you track. Mr. Chairman, I seek to unanimous.
Yeah, that I would like to point that out too. So he's making a lot of claims. After he initially claimed he had no idea what the numbers were, he then made very confident claims that, well, the I don't know what the base number is of how many people we trained, but I can be very confident it's a very small number of the people that we trained that went on to overthrow a small government. I mean, you can't have it both ways there. This Langley guy, he needs to probably have a professional development session with media training. Wouldn't you think?
So
he's very bad at that.
Yeah, he is terrible at it. Fox, if you were a poor African nation's military and you had the U.S. government offer to give you professional development and training and equipping your military, are you going to care about the briefing about how the democratic military works, or would you care about the weapons and the tactics they're going to teach you?
I would be much more interested in the weapons and the tactics.
How much do you think you're going to absorb of each category?
Probably I will absorb a lot of weapons fire. I mean, knowledge about the weapons, and probably not a lot about the democracy part of it.
Yeah, that's now another question. Would you say that the U.S. government has a long history of training and equipping terrorist groups?
Yeah, I think it's not even conspiracy theory territory anymore, but I believe that it's common knowledge now that the CIA had some I don't know, we'll call it relationship with Saddam Hussein before he rose to power, and Osama bin Laden before he rose to power, and many others. I believe the mullahs in Iran as well, and all around the world. We seem to have these interesting training relationships with various militarized agencies in America, and around about a decade later, without fail, these tend to go awry in some ways, and so it looks like it might be franchising that process in Africa because it worked so well in the Middle East, and we're now again attempting to bring our values to the African people, and hope that they imbibe them and live by them and don't just use them and figure, because really what's going on here, right, is let's say that this is at surface level what they say is going on of just Americans going there to teach these people about democracy. First off, that's probably a little bit colonial and racist. I think some people would probably think that. But at best, what you have is you have people in Africa who are now learning, okay, these are the things I need to say to get the Americans to pay attention to me. These are the things I need to say to get a Western audience to support me, to fund me, to put sanctions against my government, to remove sanctions against my government, to maybe do this or that, or subsidize these things, or subsidize that thing. Really, what this is a masterclass in training less developed nations to get what they want out of more developed nations like us.
I think what is also true is that a lot of these countries that they're dealing with, the military is in the same form and structure of a terrorist group, that they are simply controlling their territory through the threat of violence and a similar structure to a terrorist group, and not the same kind of highly regulated structure of a military like in the Western world.
Yeah, I mean, even I guess like engaging with these groups on some kind of pretend level, like what we did in Afghanistan, where we pretended that the Afghani security forces were a real military, and we pretended so hard that we actually engaged with them as if they were a real military. And it seems that we're doing the same thing in Africa, and we've tried that thing over the years in the Middle East, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work because they're not real militaries. We engage with them with the expectation that they will think about and react to things in the same way that we do, and I'll hazard to call it a civilized manner. And they don't do that. They don't react to things in the same way, and they're not in the same structure, and they don't have the same goals or values that we do. And it's because we pretend over and over again that they are the same as us that we are suddenly shocked every time that they're not.
Yeah, so in Africa, we are supporting, in the cases where the government is anti-American, we're supporting the terrorists to overthrow them. And in the cases where the government is pro-American, we're supporting training and equipping the government, which sometimes is the military. Oftentimes it is the military. And the distinction between the military and the terrorist group, often what's the difference between the two of them is who's currently has control of the government, but as far as complexity and tactics, they're the same.
Yeah,
right?
it's usually comes down to who gives the CIA the best deals on Poppy, but I'll digress on that.
So the point is, we are funding and training terrorists and in Africa, and as we have been in the Middle East and other parts of the world. So it's just further proof he's providing them. And the guy they've put, General Langley, they brought up here, he is supposed to give a innocent circumstance, an explanation that, we're not actually responsible for what they do.
Core values.
We just teach them about what is how a democratically run, civilian-led military operates in hopes that they will emulate us, but we're not responsible for their actions after they leave our classroom. But that's what he should have said if he was just trying to follow his own cover story. But he couldn't do that.
Yeah. Let's let this video play out here.
Unanimous consent to enter into the record, another U.S. trained soldier stages a coup in West Africa by The Intercept.
Without objection, so ordered.
And I further seek unanimous consent to enter into the record, U.S. forces trained the Guinean colonel behind the recent coup in West African country, and this is regard to Guinea.
Without objection, so ordered.
So I guess the question is, why should U.S. taxpayers be paying to train people who then lead coups in Africa?
Congressman, our curriculum harvests core values and also to be able to embolden these countries for a representative democracy.
But General, that democracy isn't what emerges. The problem is, I know you may have great confidence in what you're teaching, but when two governments have been overthrown, I guess how many governments have to be overthrown by people we train before you sort of get the message that our core values might not be sticking with everyone? Is it 5 countries? 10?
We'll continue with our persistence in assuring
But do you think it's
that they harbor democratic norms, democratic values.
Just a moment ago,
apolitical.
you said we shared core values with Colonel Doumbouya. You said that just moments ago in response to my question, and his core value seems to be leading a coup. So I don't think it's stuck. I think we should at least know how many countries we train the coup plotters in how many is too many? Because clearly 2 is not too many, and I think we could use our resources far more effectively than doing this.
Boom. All right. So here's what is probably going on. So the core of the issue that Gates is trying to get to is it in the U.S.? The U.S. taxpayer is paying for something over there, and it seems that the result is that small African nations are getting overthrown. Is it in the U.S. taxpayer's interest that their money go towards this effort? Now, what is potentially going on here is probably linked to what I mentioned earlier, which is that it's kind of well known now that Saddam Hussein and Osama bin Laden were had some interactions, potentially even training with the CIA in the decade before their infamy. Those at the time were not publicly. That wasn't public knowledge, and it's really not technically public knowledge now. But I think everybody pretty much agrees on that happened. What is probably going on right now in Africa is probably the exact same thing that we were doing in the Middle East for the last 40 years, which is we pick some random group of tribal herdsmen and decide that you're going to be our guys to overthrow whatever government we don't tend to like, or governments that are aligning with the Soviets. We don't like them, and so we're going to arm and train these goat herders, and they're going to overthrow that government. And then they do, and they take over the country. And then 10 years later, they attack us with all the knowledge, the tactics, and the equipment that we gave them. That happened a dozen times in the Middle East over the last 50 years. It would seem that we are potentially attempting to do the same thing, because that was such a raging success in the Middle East. We've now franchised that and are attempting to export it to Africa. What is quite possibly happening here is that the quote-unquote core values training that we are doing in Africa is possibly a cover mission. It's possibly a cover mission for either just the U.S. military on its own or in league with the CIA to do exactly what we did in the Middle East, which is to train groups of people who are capable of insurgency to commit insurgencies and overthrow governments of African nations that we don't like. So the question is that in the interest, whether or not, let's see. Yeah. Whether or not we are doing that on purpose or it's an accident, the end result is that African nations are being overthrown. So is it in the interest of the U.S. taxpayer for that to happen? Let's see here. Okay, well, that's not... Dyer, you're the one who took a really long time on this story. I mean, you said 2 hours, and we've spent an hour on this story.
I know.
And it's all your faults. Like, I don't... Don't tell me. Tell you.
I'll tell me right now.
All right. Well, so if you look at the parallels between Africa now and the Middle East 50 years ago, we have a similar situation. With the Soviets to China now. China has partnered with and installed a lot of governments around Africa. And, that's probably not in the interest of the U.S. taxpayer for that to be the case. And so it's possible that the solution to that the military and the intelligence agencies have come up with is that we'll do the exact same thing that we did in the Middle East, maybe even do it better. And we'll train these insurgency groups to overthrow governments that we don't like. And that seems to be what's going on. Whether, again, that's intentional, and there's some kind of black ops program here, or maybe really we are just teaching core values and they aren't sticking. Either one is equally likely, but the undeniable end result is that there is African nations being overthrown, and presumably U.S. taxpayer dollars are causing that.
How many African nations have turned into democracies in the last 10 years?
I think Zimbabwe is a pretty good, and the Congo and South Africa, I think that they had some pretty raging successes with democracy. They voted that they wanted to execute all the white farmers, and they did that. I think they figured out democracy, right?
But not like the kind of democracy based on the core values that we're supposedly teaching, right?
You mean like a republic, a constitutional republic? Perhaps.
Yeah. So I would say that if they're teaching core values, they are failing miserably. And that generally you can tell what someone's doing by the results of their actions.
like Joe Biden's actions in trying to secure world peace and failing miserably at that. Let's talk about our next story.
Yeah, so one of the consequences of a weak military, as we discussed, is that our adversaries do not fear us. One of the results of that, one of the many results, is that Iran has launched over 70 attacks on U.S. bases. And yes, we have U.S. bases and troops in Syria. You might not know that, but Iranian-backed forces are attacking U.S. bases in Syria. And the most recent one on Thursday, it was a strike by a suspected Iranian-made drone, killed a U.S. contractor and wounded 6 other Americans. These Americans, who was not a contractor apparently, were in northeast Syria, and U.S. forces retaliated with airstrikes on sites in Syria used by groups affiliated with Iran's Revolutionary Guard. The Pentagon said activists said the U.S. bombing killed 4 people.
Really, that's disqualifying for DeSantis, right?
Yeah. The U.S. tends to have a record of when they try to do a retaliatory strike of not hitting actual military targets and hitting kids and aid workers. So the 4 people,
and if at all possible, the children of aid workers.
Yes. So the U.S. I'm not sure if many people know we have troops in Syria, but we still do, and I think there's no reason for us to still have troops there.
Well, we're at war with Syria, right? Congress declared war against Syria, so I mean, there's a reason.
We are not at war with Syria.
Oh, well.
Yeah, we've been at war in Syria.
By golly.
We've been fighting the Syrian government that's being propped up and supported by Russia.
You're not suggesting that the U.S. military is conducting an illegal war that was not sanctioned by the People's Congress, the elected members of Congress. You're not suggesting that.
I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying that the U.S.
You're just telling me that it happened.
I'm just telling you that the U.S. is arming and equipping and training and fighting alongside terrorist groups in Syria to try to overthrow their government in a proxy war against Russia.
What is left in Syria? Isn't like all of Syria like in Europe now? Like, I just don't understand what's left to fight over. I do know that one of our bases also just happens to be on an oil field, so that probably answers my question, doesn't it?
Yes, it's about oil.
Okay.
See, the reason why we're in Syria is because Biden took away our ability to pump our own oil. So now we are dependent on getting oil from other countries to sustain our basic energy needs.
You know, you started this off with these attacks, and this is just the first of many attacks that we had this week. You said that these are maybe the consequences of a weak military, and I think maybe you misspoke, because these are really more the consequences of a weak leader of the military, right? I mean,
both.
Whether we had a weak military or not, we knew that Trump was kind of a wild child, so people didn't screw around because they didn't want to find out, and we didn't have to test our resolve quite as much as we do under Biden.
Year to year, not just talking about this year, but each year since Biden has been in office, there has been twice the number of attacks from Iranian groups against U.S. bases. And it's partly because they don't fear us, partly because we're not responding with more than harsh words and blowing up civilians occasionally. Biden said, I didn't pull up the clip, but his response wasn't that if you keep attacking us, we're going to destroy you in fire and fury. We're going to send you to hell along with your family if you attack us. He didn't say something like that. He said that there would be, severe consequences, and we will discuss that when it happens. So something along those lines, like really non-threatening words from the U.S. president in response to a U.S. citizen being killed in a war zone.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for the bad guys, it's pretty nice when Biden's got dementia, because if he says, next time there'll be consequences later, he's not going to remember it later.
Exactly. So my take on this is that we shouldn't be there in the first place. We should be pumping our own oil. We shouldn't be dependent on spending our blood and treasure in the sandbox just to get their oil. But if we are going to be somewhere, they need to fear us, and they need to know that if they attack us, there will be swift and painful consequences, and neither of those things are happening right now.
So what is happening though is, you remember those M1 Abrams tanks that we're sending over to the Ukraine?
Yeah.
Apparently, we're putting nuclear warheads inside them. That's what I heard from the mainstream media. They said that we're sending uranium nuclear tipped tank rounds to Ukraine. Is that true? Is that true?
So I did see quite a bit of outrage about people, the fact that we were sending depleted uranium tank shells over to you.
Because those explode like a nuclear bomb, right? They got uranium in them, just like bombs
depleted
do.
uranium is a very dense material that is good for penetrating armor.
It's about 5 times as dense as lead. So if you have a pound of lead in your hand and the same volume of uranium in your hand will fall off from radiation poisoning. But it would also be 5 times heavier.
Right. It does have a little bit of radiation, not nearly as if it were not depleted, but it does need to be shielded. It is dangerous to handle. But so the reason why I'm surprised people are outraged about this now is because didn't you realize when you say we're giving them Abrams tanks that it means that you get the things that come along with the Abrams tanks?
I distinctly remember a really long time ago, actually, it was about a week and a half ago, being called a Putin apologist, a possible Russian spy, an un-American non-patriot for saying I didn't want to send M1 Abrams tanks to Ukraine, possibly treason I was guilty of, right? That was as far back as a week and a half ago. Members of even Republican Congress were saying that about people who disagreed with sending the M1 Abrams tanks over there. And then all of a sudden they find out, well, we're okay with sending, these multi-billion dollar, groups of machines over there, but gosh, we can't arm them. Are you kidding me? That would be escalation. How could you?
So depleted uranium shells are the standard for modern battle tank anti-armor rounds.
Yes, there's some wonderful animations and practical footage on YouTube if you would like to see what a depleted uranium tank shell does to another tank. It is scary. Basically, they're so heavy that when they hit the tank armor, they just keep going.
Right. So when we were talking about the story before about sending the Abrams tanks to Ukraine, we were talking about the full support package, setting up the supply chain, setting up the maintenance and the places where they're going to fix them and train the people how to use them. And it's going to come along with all the support equipment. And obviously it comes along with the ammo that the tank fires. And yeah, there's multiple different types of ammo, but there are different types of ammo for different missions. This is the armor penetrating round that the tank uses, and of course when you send the platform you get the ammo along with it. So if you're outraged about the depleted uranium shells, you should have been outraged when they were talking about sending the tanks.
This would be equivalent, and it actually is equivalent, to if the Second Amendment debate in America was not over guns but over ammo. If the left was extremely pro giving everybody and their child and their mother a gun, but was absolutely outraged and protesting in the street that anybody would be getting ammo for those guns. That's basically what's going on with these tanks here.
Right.
Clearly, that we can see how that's an incoherent reasoning.
So I don't think that the depleted uranium rounds itself is a massive escalation. I think it's the same part of the escalation as the tanks being sent. However, the tanks being sent and the realization that, it means that they're getting modern ammo for their modern weapons. This is all just another grain on the heap. There's a steady escalation, between Russia's actions, the U.S.'s actions, and Chinese actions, NATO's actions, all escalating slowly, one little bit at a time, towards World War III. And the thing is, no one knows when then suddenly happens. We don't see it. It's not on the schedule, right? There's not this criteria of this one thing happens and then finally it's escalated enough that we're finally at war. No. At some point, some leader is going to be at their breaking point and is going to escalate to full-on warfare.
Well, and I think that I don't exactly remember what the trigger point for World War II was, but I think everybody knows what the trigger point for World War I was. But it's not military action that would trigger these large conflicts. It's not some sort of broad military action. It's some kind of innocuous political action that then cascades into a military response that triggers those world level wars. So yeah, it's not going to necessarily, but what that military buildup sets the stage. It lays out the kindling for which a small political event can set fire to. And so what we're doing is we're adding not necessarily grains to a heap, but kindling to the area, and then anything could set a spark to that.
Yeah, another part of the escalation is that China and Russia had a summit this last was it Monday? Yeah, Monday. So Xi Jinping flew over to Moscow to meet with Putin, and
they sat at very, very large tables.
Yeah, they did. They love their big tables. So Xi said his reason, or said this about the summit, saying, "I am confident the visit will be fruitful and give new impetus to the healthy and stable development of China-Russia relations, of comprehensive partnership and strategic cooperation in a new era." Also talked about talked about how they're going to see a change that there hasn't been in 100 years.
And do you have in here about China brokering some kind of peace
That's
agreement?
in the notes.
Okay.
Yep.
Wonderful.
So the Biden previously had tried to negotiate peace between Russia and Ukraine, which is funny because we in no way are a neutral party. We are basically fighting the war for them. So no, it'd basically be us trying to negotiate peace between ourselves and Russia. So it doesn't make sense. But also, Biden put into the requirement that there would be no negotiations unless Russia pulled out all their forces from Ukrainian territories entirely first. I believe that included Crimea, which means it was a no-go for Russia. They wouldn't even sit down at the negotiating table because the terms that Biden set were not...
Which are ridiculous terms. You negotiate where you're at, not where you want to be at. At that point, there's no negotiation. You've just had them do what you wanted to do. I mean, that's not really the art of the deal.
Exactly. So there's no way Russia would take that, because you would the starting requirement to negotiate was take away all your leverage. No, that's not going to happen. Even if that's what I wanted the final outcome to be, they wouldn't give up that leverage, at the very beginning of the negotiations. Well, China, the stated purpose for the meeting between China and Russia was to offer to negotiate the end of the Ukraine war. Xi provided a 12-point proposal that were very vague in nature, but it did at multiple points condemn the U.S. and NATO, not by name, but mentioning their actions, like referring to the Cold War mentality of the people involved, referring to us. Without mentioning either Russia or Ukraine, the proposal included that the sovereignty of all countries should be upheld. The proposal however, did not require that any troops be moved out of anyone's territory for negotiations to happen. So China is trying to supplant the U.S.'s role as being the global leader, the superpower, the one that is the arbiter between other nations.
Wasn't Biden supposed to be like an unprecedented master of like foreign policy and securing, America's back?
Yeah, so we definitely haven't gained the respect that he claimed we would have. I think no one respects him. We have Iran putting out a funny SNL-style clip mocking him and Kamala. He's a laughingstock of the world right now, and no one fears him or respects him. And yeah, they would rather have Xi Jinping negotiate. But again, China's not a neutral party either, right? So the China is very much in a economic and military alliance with Russia, and our actions are just pushing the two of them together even more, making them reliant on each other. So that's the feature we're moving into. I think that escalation of them becoming more military and economically reliant on each other is more of a threat, more of a setting the stage for there to be a flash in the pan.
There are things being done right now on the world stage that are irreversible. Even in 2 years, regardless of who we get in 2 years, there are alliances being formed and precedents being set that are irreversible. The damage that electing Joe Biden will do to American security will have echoing ramifications for the next 50 to 100 years.
Right now, both Russia and China have very, very big reasons to go to war with us. Because China wants to take Taiwan. China is trying to supplant our influence around the world in Asia and Africa. They don't like that we are trying to overthrow and prevent the governments that they have put in, puppets into leadership. They've bought and sold a lot of the smaller governments to get influence there, right? And they don't like that we're trying to fight them doing that. They don't like that we are blocking them from taking Taiwan. They want to, on their long-term plan, take over our role as superpower of the world. Russia feels threatened by NATO and the U.S., and they feel like that us trying to get Ukraine to join NATO was a direct threat to their sovereignty. So they have reasons to go to war with us. And now they are being pushed together and they're relying on each other to survive. And we are sanctioning both countries, depriving them of resources. So it would only take a little more escalation for them to say, you know what, it's worth the risk.
And really, all of this in its totality it's disqualifying for Ron DeSantis.
Yes, I think we can all agree with that.
Yes.
Also disqualifying are the banks.
Banks. All
Banks.
right. We have some lovely buildings of banks collapsing, or some pictures of banks collapsing. Are these AI generated?
Yeah.
Wow. Look at that. All right. So banks. All right.
Banks.
So what is going on in the world of finance? That has been of some interest in things that have been happening lately. So before we talk about what happened this week in the world of finance and why your dollar is evaporating before your eyes, we need to understand a few terms first. So we have quantitative easing, or QE, and quantitative tightening, or QT. QE is the Fed printing money. It's the money printers go burr. Anytime you hear about QE, that is money printers go burr. QT, quantitative tightening, is when the printers are not going burr. And also usually the interest rates go up. And what that does is it has the effect of pulling money out of the system, more like the money fires go burr. And so QE is money printers go burr, and QT is money fires go burr. Burr. All right. So QE, quantitative easing, that's when they're printing money, and that causes inflation. Theoretically, there's some benefits to that, though. Quantitative easing also makes sure that there's more money in the system, so that's easier for you to get a loan for a house or a loan for a car, or maybe a business can get a loan to buy a new factory. All of that generates beneficial economic activity as kind of the counterweight to the fact that you're causing inflation. So it's, you've got the inflation as the con, and the trade-off is that you have more economic activity in theory. However, this additional economic activity, the stimulized economy, can create bubbles, which cause problems. Quantitative tightening, on the other hand, is when you're raising rates raising interest rates, and that pulls money back out of the system. So QE is putting money into the system, QT is pulling money out of the system, and that lowers inflation, theoretically, but it also slows down the issuing of new loans and also slows down speculative investments that can cause bubbles. That's a good thing, but the slowing down of issuing loans means that it'll be harder for you to buy a house or a car or for that business to buy a factory. And also sometimes it makes it harder for that small business to pay you your wages, which is bad. But again, it's a trade-off. So you've got lower inflation, lower prices, but the trade-off is that you have less economic activity. So you can see there's the two methods there. QE is the trade-off is QE is high inflation but more economic activity, and QT is lower inflation and less economic activity. So some parts of those are good, some parts of them are bad. It kind of depends on what the current situation is, which one of those you want to employ. Which one's the Fed employing, Dyer?
Well, obviously the Fed has been raising rates. They even raised it another 0.25% this week. Just looking at the last 6 months, the raising Fed interest rates QT have had the effect of pulling about $100 million out of the money supply every month. $100 million a month is both way too fast, hence why the bond market crashed, and the banks started collapsing, and also way too slow given by the still astronomical high 6% inflation rate.
Yeah, so we have the situation where we've gotten ourselves into such a pickle with the inflation and the money printing of the last decade that the quantitative tightening, pulling money back out of the system, we can't do it fast enough, and we also, doing it too fast causes, what you're seeing on the screen here. And so we have gotten ourselves into a problem, because to do it at the speed that we would need to do it at a slow enough speed to make sure the banks don't collapse, we would be at like 20 to 40% inflation maybe by the time we actually got it fixed. I mean, you'd be talking about years of increasing the inflation rate by about 1% every month for years. And so we have to raise the rates higher, because that's just not sustainable. We would have other societal collapses due to the inflation rate being so high. But the trade-off is that we had to pull it out too fast, and then the banks collapsed. So it's quite the pickle. Those really smart people at the Federal Reserve, like Janet Yellen and Jerome Powell, they're just so smart. They're so smart. All of this stuff was very predictable before it happened. All right, so basically, based off that explanation that you gave us, Dyer, about the effects that we're having right now, basically the dollar is broken, and it might be so broken that it's not fixable. But what are you going to do? Well, that's a bad thing. Something fundamentally more devious happened this week. As you probably have heard, European banks are also breaking, not just American ones. Credit Suisse, in particular, was the first, but there are probably many more in Europe soon to follow. The European central banks and the American Federal Reserve Bank, which is our central bank, they would like very much for European banks to not collapse. They would like very much for that to not happen. So they have decided together that it would be beneficial for them if the American citizen just paid for a bailout for all the European banks. Isn't that very nice of them? So nice.
So nice.
So nice. Okay, so the way the Fed is going to use you, the American citizen, to bail out the European banks is, obviously, if they called it a bailout, you would be very upset about that. There'd probably be people in the streets. But they're not going to call it a bailout. They're going to call it credit swap lines, which nobody really knows what that means. I'm going to explain it to you, but nobody knows what that means, so everybody's okay with it. If they called it a bailout, there'd be chaos in the streets, but they're just going to do the exact same thing and call it credit swap lines. Isn't that nice? So a credit swap line, these are mechanisms that predate the current crisis. But so again, like the FDIC, it predated the current crisis, but they took the FDIC and then stretched it way beyond what it was supposed to ever do. And they created a new super FDIC with unlimited insurance. And same thing with these credit swap lines. They just took them this week and stretched them really hard into something that they were never supposed to be. And they now have become a new mechanism for bailing stuff out. For a mechanism for not bailing just anything out, but for America to bail out Europe. That's what they've become. All right, so The way they are doing this is, let's see here. So the credit swap lines were supposed to be a way for central banks in Europe and America to quickly swap back and forth different currencies, just to make sure that international trade could happen in the way that it needed to happen. Maybe we've got too many euros and we needed to swap those out for some dollars, or more likely Europe's got too many euros and they needed to swap them out for some dollars. And that just helps streamline international trade. It was a very good system for that. What we're now using it for is not for facilitating international trade. What the Fed is now doing is using these credit swap lines to send hundreds of millions of dollars, not just any dollars, newly printed dollars to Europe. Again, these were like in the tens of millions to millions of dollars swap lines, and now they're in the hundreds of millions of newly, freshly printed money directly injected into Europe. In exchange, we are getting whatever garbage currency the Europeans have, which is, as bad as the dollar is, the euro is even worse. All right. So to give you a scale of what is happening. So the quantitative tightening that Dyer was just talking about, that the Fed's been engaging in for several months, just in the last 6 months, we've pulled about $600 million out of the money supply just in the past 6 months. In the first 2 days of last week, the Federal Reserve sent $600 million newly printed U.S. dollars to Europe via these credit swap lines. They completely undid all the progress of the last 6 months. So the quantitative tightening of pulling $600 million out of the money supply in the last 6 months, that was so fast it caused American banks to collapse. And then to prevent more European banks to collapse, they put the same amount of money that they just pulled out of the system, they just re-injected it back into the system from the European side. Isn't that fun,
So
Dyer?
what was gained?
I think what was gained is that the big banks in America got to be even bigger. I believe that Janet Yellen and of the Treasury and Jerome Powell of the Federal Reserve, they've now created a new super FDIC, of which they have full control over and get to arbitrate who gets more money. The European banks were able to consolidate more power, and they've now created this new mechanism by which we can send money to Europe completely unimpeded. So yeah, that was what was gained, Dyer, is they just got infinitely more power in the last 6 months. Isn't that very nice?
No, no.
Oh, well, you're just one of them naysayers.
I wonder how many people were hurt by the little operation they did to consolidate the banks.
Yeah. So, again, just to reiterate what happened, over the last 6 months, we pulled $600 million out of the domestic continental American economy to try to combat inflation.
Yeah.
And then in 2 days last week, we sent we recreated that $600 million and sent it to Europe over the course of 2 days.
And we're not done.
We're not even close to done. Not even close to done with that. That was just the start. That was just the first 2 days.
What you meant to say when you said nothing was gained is actually we've lost ground.
Well, we will by the end of next week. We will have lost ground.
So we now have a situation where we have QT and QE, both money printing and money destruction going on at the same time, but critically not in the same place. And that makes a big difference. Let's remember that the pros and cons of QE and QT. The cons of QT, which is the raising of the interest rates and the shrinking of the money supply, means it will be harder for you to get a loan for a house or a car, and harder for your company to invest in a new factory, and harder for them to continue paying your wages, unless you work for the government. But the trade-off is supposed to be that prices go down, that inflation slows down.
But all of that newly printed money that we just gave Europe, it has to go somewhere, and that somewhere is here. All of that money we just gave Europe will inevitably come back to the U.S., not to give you a loan for a car or to make sure that your company can make payroll, but to buy stuff, our houses, our farmland, our cars, our eggs, anything in America that is for sale in dollars, and it will be available for purchase by Europeans who now have 600 million new US dollars that they have to do something with. That will continue to drive up prices and drive up inflation. Up and up and up and up it goes.
So now we have the American citizen. The American citizens are in a situation where we got to deal with all the negative parts of quantitative tightening and also all the bad parts of quantitative easing for Europe.
So they've broken the trade-off relationship between money printing and money destruction. So we were in a situation where we were trading off liquidity, being able to get cheap and easy loans. We were trading that off for stopping inflation. But now you get to keep that it's hard to get loans. You get to keep that there's not enough liquidity in the system for your company to continue functioning, but you also get the inflation. Isn't that nice?
That's great.
Isn't that so great?
It's the worst of both worlds.
So I know that I made this story a little more complicated by saying QE and QT and quantitative easing and quantitative tightening. The reason why I wanted to keep reiterating it, and the reason why I kept defining them over and over again, is because I want you guys, when you guys are listening or hearing the mainstream media or reading articles or anything like that, the coded language, and especially hearing any statement from the Federal Reserve or the Treasury or the IMF, or even just the regular, Joe Biden talking about this, they're going to use these words because you don't know what they mean. You might still not know what they mean. I would encourage you to re-listen to the segment to try to get a better understanding of what both those terms mean. But they use those terms because you don't know what they mean. Based off what they actually mean, what I just explained to you, what they mean, you suddenly now realize, oh, that means bad stuff for me. But when you don't know what it means, you don't know that it's a bad thing for you. But now that you do know, I encourage you to realize that's a bad thing.
Yes.
All right. So, isn't that exciting though? That's really nice. I'm happy that they're getting, more power, more power to them, right? It's a good thing. They always do good things with that power. So,
they call me selfish, but,
you're selfish, Dyer.
Yeah. This is bad for everyone else though.
It's bad for us too.
Yeah.
Very good for the banks. Very not good for us.
Bad for us. Good for the banks.
And you had mentioned earlier that this is just the start. So you have no idea. So they're using the existing credit swap lines. These are pre-existing mechanisms, but they've stretched them in a way that they were not designed to stretch to start with, and that will have problems later on. The Federal Reserve is working on a new lending facility, which is just to say a bit like a program. It's a new program. They're not building a bank or something like that. They're just making a new program by which Europe can request loans directly. And so right now we're doing some funny business where the Europeans are sending us their worthless currency and we're sending them new freshly printed dollars, which actually has a dual effect of continuing to inflate the dollar and also deflate European currencies. Isn't that interesting? So it actually makes the dollar even worse off in the forex markets, which is not good. That's going to cause a lot of problems with import-export, dollar exchange rates. It's going to really screw up the dollar exchange rate doing this, where you're destroying hundreds of millions of dollars of European currency at the same time creating hundreds of millions of dollars of U.S. currency. It's going to destroy the currency swap markets.
It's going to raise my rent.
Yes, it absolutely will. Yes, because you're going to be buying your rent with dollars that are less powerful. Yep.
Well,
yeah,
so I pay my rent in British currency. I have to do exchange for dollars to British currency.
I don't know what it's going to do for you, but it's going to screw it up.
It's going to make
the rate that you pay next week will not be the same rate that you paid last week. So it does that, but now we are going to create this new mechanism where we don't have to use the credit swap lines. It will be just direct lending to European and also to American banks, where now the Fed doesn't have to go through the pretense of having the Treasury authorize the creation of new money. They're going to be loaning it out directly. Now, they already do this to a certain extent. This is called the window. You've probably heard this term before, that the Federal Reserve has a window that you can go up to. It used to be a real window. It's not anymore. And you could get a loan from, if you were a big bank, you go get a loan from the Fed. Usually you would just hold that loan overnight, and it kind of helps stabilize the number sheets. Not really important why, it just did. Well, now they want to build a new facility that's kind of, and again, by that I mean a program, that does a similar thing, but is for a longer term basis. And so what this will allow them to do is drop the pretext of the credit swap lines where they're swapping currencies back and forth. Now they can just directly just dump US dollars into Europe. And again, where do those dollars end up back up at? Here. And what are they buying with those dollars? They're buying American products, but also they're buying oil. As we know, we got the petrodollar for now, and decreasing the probability of that every day. But we're giving Europe money to compete with us in the global oil trade. So we're paying with inflation. Again, these are newly printed dollars. They didn't come from your tax dollars, but they're being paid for by you by the fact that it's going to cause prices to rise. So that's how you're paying for this. It's how the American citizen, even if you're not a taxpayer, is paying for this. We're paying for Europe to continue driving up prices of oil. So we're paying for the inflation the first time, and then we're going to get double inflation again, because now Europe is going to be outbidding us on oil that's bidded for in dollars, and they're going to be outbidding us with our own dollars.
Fantastic.
These are the smartest people in the world, Dyer.
Getting elected doesn't mean you're smart.
Well, these aren't even elected people. These are like none of these people that I'm talking about have been elected. Like the Treasury Secretary is not elected. The Federal Reserve is not elected.
Well, I assume you meant the people that are putting them in power. I'm assuming you mean the officials that we have elected who built this deep state and economic structure. I was going back that far back.
Very generous of you.
Yeah, these people are idiots, but they're also like Janet Yellen could have been fired, right?
I guess in theory,
but she wasn't.
Yeah.
We're allowing this. Anyways, go on.
Alrighty. Ready for our next story? Yes.
It's A1.
It is A1, and it also was not special enough to get a fun AI-generated picture. Because Dyer hates this story. That's all right. Yes. I'll pull up this. I have an article that we're going to read later, so I'll just throw that up. Alrighty. Trump.
This is such a stupid distraction.
All right, so Dyer, isn't it crazy how Trump got arrested on Tuesday?
He didn't.
Are you sure? Are you sure?
I'm absolutely sure Trump did not get arrested on Tuesday.
Are you sure? Because I'm very. Everybody I was listening to this week, they were all very confident that Trump was going to get arrested on Tuesday. There were so many commentators talking nonstop all last weekend, all Monday, all Tuesday morning about how Trump was going to get arrested on Tuesday. And they were all speculating on the aftermath as if it had already happened. And basically generally ignoring every other possible story because it was so important that Trump actually did get arrested on Tuesday. That's what I heard. That's why they ignored this whole story about the finance thing I just talked about. That's why I ignored all the attacks from Syria, and they ignored all the stuff going on in Europe with Ukraine. Because it was so important to talk about the speculation that Trump. And so you're telling me Trump didn't get arrested on Tuesday?
No, he did not, and everyone talked about it except for Direwolf Media. That is.
Oh yeah, that's right.
If I remember correctly, we just said, well, he said he might get arrested. The story doesn't make any sense. I guess we'll report on it if something actually happens.
Yeah, you're right. We did not. We never covered the thing that didn't happen. That's pretty crazy, right? We didn't cover a thing that never happened, and thank goodness, because by goodness, we sure would have felt awful silly if we had covered an event that never happened. And I'm sure, Dyer, it must be that all of those other commentators I heard this week that were talking about it nonstop, they all must be really embarrassed when they realized it never happened.
Actually, they're doubling down on
God damn it. Oh,
So, because we didn't cover it last week, because we tried to do our best not to cover things that didn't happen, or we have no proof of happening, or make absolutely no sense and have no proof, we like to report on things that actually we can verify have happened. Call us crazy. But here's the update, because things actually have happened, right?
no,
So
not
week-
really. We're more covering about how it didn't
The thing that happened
Yeah,
was
just
that
read what I
people
wrote.
ta-
It's just
was that people talked about it and nothing happened.
Yes.
That's what happened. So last week, Trump truth out on Truth Social something which was not the truth, which was that he was going to be arrested on Tuesday. This did not happen. Fox and I did not think it was likely to happen because it made absolutely zero fucking sense, and we were correct. Now there are some of you out there who may be thinking, yes, it didn't happen, but wouldn't it have happened? Would it have been a big deal if it had happened? You are correct. It would have been a big deal if it had happened. It would be a big deal if global warming caused the seas to rise by 10 feet in a day. It would be a big deal if aliens blew up New York tomorrow. It would be a big deal if Kamala Harris was able to speak a full and complete sentence that was articulate and coherent. Had an articulate and a coherent idea without laughing like a crazy person. But none of those things are likely to happen. So we didn't waste time talking about what ifs they did happen. Like the question of if Trump would be arrested or not. If it did happen, we would certainly have talked about it after the fact. But we just didn't have enough time in the day to cover the infinite continuum of all possible effects of all the possible things that could possibly happen.
Yes. We will talk more about the substance of what really is going on with the Trump case in New York and the DA and Stormy Daniels and Horseface, all that stuff. We'll talk more about the substance of that in a bit. But let's first focus on the claim of the arrest. So after Tuesday came and went with no arrests, everyone that was speculating that Trump was going to get arrested on Tuesday, they all pivoted to, well, actually, he's going to get indicted on Wednesday. So that's I guess that's a pivot, but I mean, that's kind of a lackluster pivot, right? We went from arrest on Tuesday to indictment on Wednesday. I mean, man, come on, guys. So everybody pivoted, but Dyer and I were pretty skeptical of the indictment on Wednesday as well. And when Wednesday came and went without, did Trump get indicted on Wednesday?
No,
he did not. So Wednesday came and went without an indictment. The alarmists all pivoted once again. It wasn't that so many commentators and Twitter warriors all got it wrong. No. Of course not. Everybody who said that Trump was going to get arrested on Tuesday and that Trump was going to get indicted on Wednesday, they were actually correct. But because they made such a big deal about it, that's why Trump didn't get arrested. It was because they talked about it. It wasn't because they were wrong. It was because, in fact, they talked about it is why Trump didn't get arrested. And furthermore, the doubters like Dyer and I, we helped spread rumors. Because we didn't help spread rumors and speculation last week, it was actually Dyer and I's fault that Trump was almost arrested. If we were more responsible with our commentary, we would have also speculated on events that didn't happen yet as if they did. It is circular reasoning, and it was unfalsifiable what a lot of these people were saying. And so let's falsify the theory anyway. Again, the theory is that everybody who said, well, Trump's going to get arrested on Tuesday, he's going to get indicted on Wednesday, and then on Thursday they said, well, the only reason why he didn't, the only reason why we were wrong about those things is because we talked about them. If we talked about them, and that's what caused it to not happen. That is circular reasoning. There's an attempt at making it unfalsifiable, but Dyer, let's falsify it anyways.
All right. So here's why that double down is still wrong. It was not social media outrage that stopped Trump from getting arrested this week. His arrest just didn't seem to be on the schedule for Tuesday. Multiple media sources from before Monday stated clearly that the grand jury was only possibly going to hear from a final witness on Tuesday. But that was only a guess, and multiple outlets stated that they could call for more. So it was not even clear that the case was even at the stage where they could vote to indict Trump.
There was still
And
possibly more
Yeah.
people to come testify. So like
the hearings were not over.
Yes, the hearings weren't over. So again, what do you have to get Trump arrested? Well, Trump has to be arrested. He had to be indicted. To get the indictment, you had to have the case be completed. The case wasn't completed yet. And as of Monday, as of articles that were published on Monday, it wasn't even clear that there was any reason for the case to be over by Tuesday.
Right. So the one of the reasons why we were skeptical initially, like, oh, they're saying he's getting arrested. Well, he's not even indicted yet. They're still having hearings. Anyways, so there's no way he could have been indicted at the day that they said he was going to be indicted, let alone arrested. YouTuber pundits try to get clicks who were trying to get clicks had nothing to do with it.
Yeah,
so it was not going to get indicted that day anyways.
Yeah, so it wasn't because people absolutely lost their minds. I hate talking about people, naming names, but I think everybody is well aware of the large volume of commentators that talked about this week. But it wasn't because they all talked about what if Trump gets arrested that caused Trump to not get arrested. It just simply wasn't on the grand jury schedule to be ready to indict Trump yet. They still had witnesses on the schedule to come testify. The case never had a chance of being over yet by Tuesday. So
right.
It wasn't because everybody talked about it. But again, that is the excuse all of these commentators for their irresponsible coverage last week. That's the excuse that they're all giving, is that it's really, even though Dyer and I were right, we're still really where we're wrong. We were actually wrong because we didn't help get Trump not arrested. If we had talked about him getting arrested, we could have also helped contribute to him not getting arrested. And so everybody who was wrong about it, they're actually not wrong. It's just that they helped defend Trump. Which is, again, like I said, very ridiculous and circular. So on Wednesday, when the story changed after, again, Trump didn't get arrested on Tuesday. On Wednesday, when the story changed to Trump was going to be indicted on that day, it was a little more plausible, but personally, I was still a doubter. And I was correct. On Wednesday, it was also announced that the grand jury would not be having any more sessions this week. They were recessing until Monday. And were they recessing until Monday because right-wing commentators all lost their minds with speculation about Trump and his arrest? Is that what caused the grand jury to recess until next week? No, it was actually testimony from one of those witnesses on Tuesday that the New York DA, Mr. Bragg, he had illegally and improperly withheld over 300 emails worth of evidence from the jury in order to try to make Trump look more bad and more orange than he really is. This is actually an outrage. It's a massive abuse of power, and he should be disbarred for that. Absolutely. But that didn't have anything to do with the outrage coverage. It had absolutely nothing to do. It would have happened anyways. The guy who brought this to the jury's attention that, hey, the DA is withholding evidence from you, he was already on the schedule to testify. This had nothing to do with the YouTube commentators. Absolutely nothing to do with the YouTube commentators. So again, Dyer and I not talking about this last week, we weren't trying to get Trump arrested by not talking about it. We didn't, by not talking about it, it wasn't that we weren't in the fight against keeping Trump from getting arrested. It's just that, well, Trump was never likely to be arrested based off what was going on. And the YouTube commentator outrage had nothing to do with it.
Yep. So, no, Fox and I are not covering this last week or
making
Thank you. Making it or not making a big deal, speculating about, did not help or hurt Trump getting not arrested. He was not going to get arrested either way. What it did hurt was our ratings. I'll recover. So because we didn't clickbait you with hours and hours of speculation about this causing a civil war, we did not get near the viewership that our other commentators got this week. Not that we would have otherwise.
No. This is my circular reasoning. It is only because we would have had 100,000 active viewers. Dyer, you'll never know. It's unfalsifiable. And this is the problem. This is why we started our story out with an explanation as to why Trump's non-arrest had nothing to do with conservative commentators getting all worked up about it. It's because of the attacks against those of us who refuse to join in with the madness and the speculation.
Yes, there were so many more important things that we should have been talking about rather than something that was not likely to happen, and just speculating about that to no end when there was things that really are happening with real world consequences that people didn't talk about this week. So DeSantis was a particular target for those attacks this week of people criticizing those who weren't taking an immediate stance on the speculation of Trump getting arrested, possibly, maybe. Part of the speculation was that if Trump was arrested, Florida would have to extradite him to New York. DeSantis was asked if he would block the extradition, and in a sense, he said he was not going to get involved in anything that at that stage, which was the right answer. It's the Trump military doctrine that you don't telegraph your next move. Wanting to know if DeSantis would block an extradition for an arrest that would not happen yet, related to indictment that hadn't happened yet, that was related to a grand jury case that wasn't finished yet, is an insane agenda tower, just insane Jenga tower of speculation to ask about. And no responsible politician would answer such a crazy speculation based on a whole bunch of requisite things happening first.
Yeah, that's all true, Dyer. But even if Trump wasn't going to get arrested this week, couldn't DeSantis at least have called out the New York DA for abusing his power? I mean, even if the Trump getting arrested story didn't happen, isn't there still a story about how corrupt Democrats are abusing the courts? And isn't that still important to talk about? And isn't that important for DeSantis to condemn?
Of course it is, and that's what DeSantis did. DeSantis did call the New York DA out for being corrupt. When asked about that, what he would do, he took the opportunity to attack that DA for being corrupt. Here is what are his exact words. He said, "I don't know what's going into paying hush money to a porn star to secure silence over some type of alleged affair. But what I can speak to is if you have a prosecutor who is ignoring crimes happening every single day in his jurisdiction, and he chooses to go back many, many years ago to try to use something about porn star hush money payments, that's an example of pursuing a political agenda." This was a fact. This was in fact an excellent statement by DeSantis. He got a barb in at Trump, and he is a political rival to Trump, so he should be doing that. He's distinguishing himself in Trump, and a massive condemnation of the New York DA. Which, by the way, I mean, DeSantis has a good record of going after bad DAs. It was a very good answer. Yet, because he didn't overcommit to an extreme reaction to a sequence of events that had not happened yet and still have not happened and are not likely to happen ever, people are ready to say that this disqualifies DeSantis from running for president.
Again, isn't that wild? You had everybody being so wrong about what was going to happen, and you get to Thursday, and instead of admitting on Thursday, oh wow, we screwed this up, maybe we should take a look at what we did to get this so wrong, they create this insane retrocausality time travel narrative that really it was the fact that they talked about it that like caused a ripple back in time to create a situation where Trump didn't get arrested. And even though Trump didn't get arrested, it's still disqualifying for DeSantis. Even after we figured out that we were wrong, it's still disqualifying for DeSantis to have not come down with a firm stance on what he would have done 8 moves ahead. You're supposed to think 8 moves ahead. You're not supposed to commit to your 8th move when you're still 8 moves behind it. Okay? That's not playing 8D chess. DeSantis not overcommitting to, again, what was the sequence of events? This was on, I think it was 2 Fridays ago DeSantis made the statement. This was a while ago. And they wanted DeSantis to commit to whether or not he was going to extradite Trump to New York if Trump got arrested, if he got indicted, if the court case got completed. And after all of that didn't happen, people are still upset at DeSantis. That's wild.
Ridiculous.
To me. Absolutely insane. And you've now got this, again, I don't know what this really does. I hope everybody kind of calms down next week, because I don't know what this does to kind of conservative commentary in general. If we're going to continue on into the future for the next 2 years up until the general, if we're going to continue on the way that we did last week, where you had, again, people being extremely wrong about something, and then after it's proven that they were wrong about something, doubling down and saying, well, only because we were wrong about that thing did it not happen. No, that you don't get to do that. And again, we started off this story with laying out why what didn't happen, Trump not getting arrested, Trump not getting indicted this week, that was all preordained by the schedule and by which people were testifying. It had nothing to do with commentators losing their minds. Absolutely nothing. And yet somehow this is disqualifying for DeSantis, and DeSantis supporters are, we're anti-Republic and all this stuff. And it's frankly ridiculous. I also want to add some context here that Trump and his supporters are now upset, which is mostly what I just said, but they're now upset that DeSantis won't plan to defend Trump 8 moves ahead from now. And meanwhile, Trump is and has been going full tilt attacking DeSantis since he launched his campaign in November. As far back ago as 2 weeks, just 2 weeks ago, which is about the week before this all started happening, Trump was posting on Truth Social that DeSantis might be a gay pedophile. Trump actually posted that on Truth Social, that he thought DeSantis could possibly be a gay pedophile.
What the fuck?
Yeah. And then again, in his rally in Waco just yesterday, constant attacks during the whole rally against DeSantis, to the exclusion of any attacks against Biden or the left. We have this article from the Daily Wire. Trump repeatedly attacks DeSantis during a rally in Waco. Former President Donald Trump held a rally in Waco, Texas on Saturday, where he repeatedly attacked Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. A lengthy clip flagged by Mediaite showed the former president's attacks not landing well with the crowd, who mostly grew silent. Quote, compared to how Trump's crowd normally reacts to his bits, the reaction to this mocking DeSantis was practically dead air, the report said. Trump attacked DeSantis's widely praised response to the pandemic, and said that DeSantis was, quote, not good on crime, and mocked him with nicknames. Trump's attacks come from an analysis from Fox News this week found that Trump attacks DeSantis 4 times more than he attacks President Joe Biden. Again, he's attacking Ron DeSantis before this whole thing even happened, to the exclusion of attacking the left. Trump should be running against Biden, not against DeSantis. DeSantis isn't even running yet. And Trump is attacking DeSantis to the exclusion of attacking Joe Biden. And then he has the Trumpdacity to expect that DeSantis would commit to defending him 8 moves ahead of a sequence of events that never even happened. This is, you want to talk about Trump derangement syndrome. This might actually be it. This might actually be an example of Trump derangement syndrome on the right. I would be willing to entertain that there is some Trump derangement syndrome going on here, because I just don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'm the one who's crazy. If you're crazy, you don't know. But to me, this is so obviously logically incoherent that I couldn't possibly understand how someone could look at this who has a sane, rational mind, and they come to the conclusions that they're coming to. I don't understand it.
I think that Trump's going to have a good number of very dedicated followers who will support him basically no matter what he does, except for something extremely extreme. But they're going to say, well, anyone who opposes him, I'm going to oppose that person. But I think that that crowd growing silent demonstrate that most conservatives would actually can recognize that DeSantis is a very good member on the right, on the conservative right, and who's doing good things for us, and that they support him, even if they also support Trump. they don't like the idea of Trump tearing down someone who is clearly a good guy who's doing good things for them.
Yeah, we may only have one presidency, but we do have 50 states, and gee, we don't. It's not like we have a surplus of good governors to run those states. Like, by God,
right. I think that the generally you should focus on the attacking the party you're trying to supplant, right, and distinguishing yourself between yourself from them, and then let your policies distinguish you between the other people on the right, because I don't want to tear down every candidate we have on the right. I would prefer that we have a field of really good people running, and then we pick the best one. Not that anyone who's not my guy has to be a gay, pedophile, evil person. It doesn't have to be that dichotomy, right? I think that Trump is making himself look bad by playing these games with DeSantis, who is obviously a good guy.
Well, and it's interesting too, because a lot of people say, well, we like Trump because he's a fighter, and so I don't know, DeSantis does kind of a really, I would say, weak sauce barb back. It was good timing. It was very good timing. And DeSantis's brand is not to be as vitriolic as Trump is. And so I think that DeSantis, when he said, well, I don't really understand how paying hush money to a porn star works, it was funny. 2, it was light, and 3, it was well timed. It was a perfect barb. But Trump said on Truth Social, he implied that DeSantis had sex with underage boys while he was a teacher at a high school. There's a Truth Social post about that. Trump can say that, and we like Trump because he's a fighter. And then DeSantis says, well, I don't really understand how, how infidelity to my wife works. And then, well, DeSantis, he can't be a fighter too. We don't like him because he's a fighter. We don't like him, but we like Trump because he's a fighter. It's incoherent. It's completely incoherent. All right.
Yeah.
So the Daily Wire article here continues. So, quote, when a man comes to me with tears in his eyes, I lost my I haven't heard Trump talk enough. I lost my accent for Trump. I used to be able to do a good one, but not anymore. He's had almost nothing in the polls, Trump claimed while referencing DeSantis in 2018's his gubernatorial election. Quote, he's at almost nothing. He's got no cash. And I said, I can give you an endorsement. There's no way you can when you're dead, Trump claimed. I said, let's give it a shot, Ron. I endorsed him. He became like a rocket ship. Within one day, the race was over. And the analysis from the DeSantis's gubernatorial election is that, yeah, he won by slim margins, but he won. I don't care. I don't care if it was by slim margins. He won. And it does seem like an endorsement from Trump probably did help get him over that slim margin. When you only win by a slim margin, every little bit helps. And so I'm sure that Trump endorsing him did help. I would never dream of saying that it didn't help, because that wouldn't make any sense. But why shouldn't the Republican president endorse a very good Republican candidate for governor of a swing state? Why shouldn't Trump do that?
He should.
Yeah. So I don't. Why is this now supposed to be DeSantis's like albatross around his neck that Trump helped him out one time? I understand from Trump's perspective, because you don't ever help each other out. You just rip each other down. People are there for you to grab hold of and climb over top of them on your way to the top. And that's worked very well for Trump. It's worked very well for Trump. I don't know that it's going, and it worked very well when he was doing that on behalf of America. There's something different about Trump's campaign this time around. And DeSantis, I think, keeps Trump up at night. Trump has DeSantis derangement syndrome. And so I just don't see the value in what Trump's doing to DeSantis or calling this stuff out. And apparently it's not landing well. I'm not the only one that this is not landing well for.
When you have a murderer who's in a jail and he kills pedophiles, people are like, yeah, good on you, right? when you have a murderer out on the streets that kills a member of your family, you hate him, right? So the
Yes,
Trump excels-
Trump's like a broken machine gun where he just keeps firing, and sometimes he's pointing in the right direction, and that's good, and sometimes he's pointed back at you and your allies, and that's not good.
Trump excels when he has a bad guy to go against. When he has someone who's an elitist Republican or a Democrat, he can go against, and his attacks are landing on someone who is bad for America and bad for the party. Then we appreciate it, right?
Why wouldn't he just follow Biden around? I mean, and if Biden's just going to stay in D.C. all the time, or if Biden's just going to go back to his home in Delaware every other weekend, Trump should just go there. Like, wherever Biden is, anytime.
His house.
Yeah, anytime Biden's talking, Trump should have a counter rally down the street. If Biden's going to be at his home in Wilmington for the weekend, Trump should buy out a hotel and have a rally in Wilmington for that weekend. Every single weekend. Trump has enough money to do that. There's no reason why Trump couldn't be just dog all over Biden every day. And he could even rotate a little bit. Maybe he could pick out Chuck Schumer every now and then, or maybe he could pick on Kamala, or maybe he could pick on there's any number of things he could be doing. Why is he after DeSantis? And again, Fox News analyzing Trump since he launched his election, 4 times more attacks against DeSantis than Biden. Certainly, there's some things to pick at DeSantis about. Is there 4 times as many things to pick on DeSantis about as compared to Biden? Really? Why isn't Trump out talking about the economy and what's going on in Europe? I mean, there's all kinds of, we've got all these attacks that we just talked about. This was a bad week for America. It was a bad week for the American dollar, and it was an extremely bad week for the future of American diplomacy and American security abroad. It was a really bad week for that. And Trump's, one of his first big campaign speeches in Waco, Texas, is to say that the only governor in America, the only governor who's doing any kind of attacks, any kind of substantive attacks, not just talk, but actually doing legal action, removing leftists from their positions, doing legal action against them, getting this stuff actually tangible results. The only governor who's actually doing that. And Trump spends his time attacking that guy? Guys, I mean, I get you like Trump. I get people like Trump. I get it. He was a great president. He really was. I think he probably would be a great president again. I don't think that he's on the correct route to get to the next great president, though, is the issue.
Yeah, still would vote for him over any Democrat, but not happy with what he's doing here. Did he even talk about Waco? Like, what happened?
I would assume he did. I didn't watch it, but...
Okay. Anyways, is there anything more for the story?
There's like the rest of the article, but I think it's mostly just rehashing that he is calling DeSantis names and then some stuff about Stormy Daniels. So it doesn't look super important. So yeah, this is Trump's guests also attacked DeSantis, including Matt Gaetz and Mike Lindell, which that doesn't reflect well on them. They should know better. Alrighty.
Well, all right.
So let me read through these bullet points right here, make sure there's nothing else I wanted to say. So Trump's also, he reiterated this week again about the case in New York against him, that it's not me they're after, it's you. I'm just in the way. So my question is DeSantis the one that's after us and Trump's just in the way? Is that why Trump's going after DeSantis so hard? Because it's just Trump standing. Maybe DeSantis is like invasion of the body snatchers or something, and maybe Trump's protecting us from DeSantis. I don't know. But does that ring true to you, Dyer? That DeSantis is really after you, but Trump's just in the way?
No, it does not.
Okay. We have this weird situation right now in the modern Republican, the postmodern Republican Party, led by Trump here. You are not allowed to criticize Trump at all for anything, but Trump is allowed to criticize you all day and night, and you just have to take it. DeSantis, people are saying it is absolutely disqualifying for DeSantis to even become a candidate for president, which he's not even a candidate for president yet. It's disqualifying because he made a barb at Trump that he doesn't know how to pay off a porn star. And yet Trump, before all this even happened, Trump can say, I think DeSantis is a gay pedophile, and that's A-okay. Not a problem at all. We are going to have a really, really tough time navigating the primary process if those are the rules of the road. That is not a sustainable rule set.
I think that DeSantis saying that he doesn't know how to pay off porn stars for hush money was a really brave thing, because he was admitting his faults and what he's not good at.
Yeah. And then I also just want to reiterate that Trump may well be indicted, and he may well have some attempt at arresting him. Dyer and I are not saying that that's never going to happen, and we're also not saying that it won't be a big deal if that happens. That's another thing that's been happening, if people have been conflating. I'm not saying that Trump's not ever going to get arrested or Trump's not ever going to get indicted. What I was saying is that it wasn't going to happen on Tuesday last week because it wasn't possible for it to happen on Tuesday last week. That was my point. And there are people out there conflating the naysayers like Dyer and I that, well, you said it's not possible to. No. I think it's possible that it happens. I just said that it's not possible to have happened on Tuesday. And if it does happen, it will be a big deal. It will be a huge deal. But once again, there's a lot of things that will be really big deals if they happen. It would be a really big deal if Kamala Harris could speak a cogent idea and articulate it in a single sentence and have it be understood by everybody who was listening to her. It'd be a really big deal. It's just not likely to happen. If it does happen, Dyer and I will cover it.
We would have to.
We would have to.
It'd be so shocking.
It would be shocking. And if and when Trump gets arrested and indicted, we will cover it. But guys, we can't cover things that aren't happening. This is not like some kind of like meta multiverse show where Dyer and I use the Mandela effect to pop in and out of other universes and bring you the news that never happened. Actually, funny, The Onion used to have a fake news show like that where it was news from the future. They were bringing you all the latest from I think it was 2137. But that's not the show Dyer and I have here. Is a speculative show about possible futures, and really, a lot of the people that were doing that this week, if they were honest with themselves, their show is also not about all the possible speculative futures that could possibly happen. Commentators are reactionary, and I think a lot of people were kind of drinking their own Kool-Aid this week, thinking, well, we have ascended from the reactionary commentary to we are now walking the dog. You know, we're wagging the dogs ourselves, where because we talked about it, it happened. And sometimes that's true. But in this case, it was not true. Talking about Trump possibly getting arrested, when you were talking about that on Monday, you did not influence what happened on Tuesday. What happened on Tuesday was already set in the jury schedule. And you did not influence on Wednesday by talking about, you did not influence the jury calling a recess until Monday. That happened because the person that was scheduled to testify on Tuesday brought them evidence that the New York DA was withholding exculpatory evidence. That was going to happen anyways. It had nothing to do with everybody talking about it. And again, I'm not saying, Dyer and I are not saying that the DA in New York is not corrupt, and we're not saying that he shouldn't be removed. He absolutely should be. He is abusing his power. They are going above and beyond against Trump. It's just Trump wasn't going to get arrested on Tuesday, and that's what everybody was hyper-focusing on.
Correct.
Alrighty. Dyer, do you want to come up? Do you have any other hardline stances on, eighth order events that haven't happened yet?
Yes. So if we send out a signal, a tachyon beam, and it gets intercepted by aliens, and aliens come to our planet, and they demand that we surrender and become their slaves, if that happens, I will choose the waffles for breakfast.
Ooh. It's what kind of topping on the waffles though?
Are you kidding me? It's peanut butter and syrup. I'm not some sort of savage.
I had I was at a mall yesterday, and the food court was very full, but there was this little smoothie kiosk very far away from the main food court, and I think everybody didn't realize it was a food court, and so it was empty. There was no line there. So I went there, and I had a kiwi and peanut butter smoothie, and it was the lady looked at me. She goes, "That's an interesting choice." And I was like, "Yes, I think it will be an interesting choice." And it was actually very good. Yes.
All right. Well, I guess we'll see you guys next Sunday then.
Yes, that is a eighth order speculative chain of events that we can come with a hardline stance on. We will stream next Sunday. Would it be really disappointing if we can't?
Yes, it will be.
All right, guys. Have a good week. We will talk to you later.